Texas holds on to defeat Wyoming at home. They move to 3-0 for the first time since 2012. Longhorns winning it 31-10. Eric Henry now joining us from DKR Memorial Stadium. Eric, not the prettiest win by any means for Texas, but the Longhorns able to pull it out. Steve Sarkisian in his post-game press conference said that, winning when it's tough is what championship teams do. They find a way to win when they're not at their best. Texas doing that tonight. What was your biggest takeaway from this one?
I'm going to be honest with you, Tommy. My biggest takeaway is I genuinely felt that this team played down to their competition for 3 quarters. And that's no disrespect to Wyoming. Obviously, we saw what they did to Texas Tech, came in here and played a pretty strong ball game. I mentioned this on the Horns 24/7 message boards. I don't want to call it gamesmanship, but it felt as if Wyoming was going to throw out all the stops. We get the backup quarterback. We were expected, at least as best as we knew, we were going to get Andrew Peasley to be the starting quarterback. We did not. We got Evan Svoboda. That's a little wrinkle. We get Harrison Whaley, his first appearance of the year. 2 plays in, he's ripping off a 66-yard touchdown run, right? So a couple of things there that when we talked to some of the players post-game, they did say that, I talked to Byron Murphy, and he said that we game prepped all week for 6. Talking about Peasley. They did not expect Harrison Whaley as well. They did not see him on film. So maybe some of those things in conjunction with some of the jitters of coming back home. Tommy, it can't be understated. 80 players on this roster are underclassmen, freshmen or sophomores. First time coming back home to DKR after a huge win. It takes a little bit to kind of get that energy going, right? But when it mattered most, and we can talk about this a little bit in terms of if it's a troublesome issue or if it's something that, you almost want to take some solace in. But the fact that they found a way to turn on in the 4th quarter of play, in my mind, Tommy, that was huge. We saw, Quinn Ewers and Jalen Ford rally the team around on the broadcast. And I asked some of the guys about that post game. I said, what was the attitude there? What was the feeling like on the sideline? They all said, hey, we got to finish. We can't let this happen this way. Quinn Ewers said that they rallied the troops and just said, hey, we're determined to go out there and show that we're not Texas teams of old. And that, again, at the end of the day, they did get a win, but certainly some things that you don't want to put your bread and butter into being a 4th quarter team, especially a team like Texas that has had such success in the opening half of the game. Yes, it's good to see them have success in the 4th quarter, but you got to put together 4 quarters of football.
As you mentioned there, Eric, in that 4th quarter, Texas 21 points. That's back-to-back weeks that the Longhorns have put up 21 in the 4th quarter. This game was tied at 10 going into that final frame. So Longhorns are going to have to find a way to maybe start this game better. But talking about, my biggest takeaway from this one, I think, is that really just an overall odd Saturday for college football. A lot of teams in the top 15 slipping. We saw Kansas State lose on a walk-off field goal to Missouri. Number 1, Georgia, scratched out a win over South Carolina at home 24-14. Florida State, number 3 team in the country, barely beats Boston College 31-29. And then Alabama holding on against USF 17-3. So if there was a week to struggle, kind of fly under the radar, Texas certainly found the right time. But now let's talk a little bit about some areas of concerns heading into Big 12 play against Baylor. Really, like I mentioned, need to get off to better starts. Seemed like some easy passes were dropped by these wide receivers for Texas, and struggles continuing to come on 3rd down. 4 of 12 tonight were the Longhorns. Eric, any additional thoughts there?
2 things. One, we thought that we were past this with the offensive game in terms of the pass game, right? With Quinn Ewers. We thought that the Alabama game was his breakout game, and that we wouldn't have some of these struggles. You noted some drop passes. I think Quinn would also note that he did miss a couple passes. We saw, a couple throws through off his back foot. We saw him miss, kind of in the wide open intermediate range of the field, the wide open Xavier Worthy. So definitely, a ball game that Quinn will look to put behind him. Now, the flip side of that is he's talked about the fact that maybe in the past he wouldn't have been able to kind of continue persevering for 4 quarters. So it is a positive that, again, he was able to, stay locked in, stay engaged, and Texas came out with the victory. But that is an area of concern because, Tommy, there are too many weapons on this team in terms of pass catchers to have a moment in the game. And I haven't had a chance to look at what Quinn finished with, but to have a moment in the game where Quinn is 11 of 21 for 80 yards, right? That's just not acceptable relative to the playmakers they have on the field. You also talked about the 3rd downs. This is something that I want to expand a little bit on as we get into the week. But, Tommy, in my mind, listen, you talk with any offensive coordinator in the nation, and they'll tell you the most ideal set of circumstances when you're on a drive is going first to second to first, meaning you go first down, second down, you're avoiding third downs altogether, right? And Texas, in my opinion, kind of played a little bit with fire in that sense, in the sense that, yes, their offensive outburst in the second half against Rice was mainly big plays that came on first and second down. You look at Alabama, it was a lot of that up until the final drive of the game. At some point in time, you will have to have a measure of success on third downs, right? And where Texas really struggled and put themselves behind the 8 ball was 3 false starts on 1st and 10. When your average down and distance, again, I haven't had a chance to look at the finals, but your average down and distance on third down was something like 7.8 yards at one point in the game, in the midway through the fourth quarter. You're putting too much pressure on your offense to have to convert third and long at all times, right? So in the situations, and again, it's like a double-edged sword, Tommy, because they have such explosive playmakers and Jonathan Brooks and in the backfield, and of course, the receivers and Jatavian Sanders, that you are going to have times that you go first to second to first. But those times that you do end up in third downs, that's what sinks your third down conversion rate when you're in those third and long. So you want to see the offense stay on schedule, not end up behind the chains, so that you can make some of those third downs more manageable. Again, I don't have the exact numbers on me, but I counted at least 3 times that Texas was in 3rd and 9 alone. Those are very hard conversions to pick up. So those 2 things you want to see cleaned up. I mean, if you look at the defensive side of the ball, I don't know about you, but I couldn't really see much out there outside of, again, they had the 64-yard touchdown run, or 61, I believe it was, the gash play that came in the 4th play of the game. But outside of that, they played a very solid ball game. You said the same thing about the special teams. So the things that I'm looking for are mainly on offense.
Yeah, just to add on to your point there, Quinn Ewers finishing 11 of 21 for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, I think for Texas, maybe want to see a little bit of improvement and a little bit of a shock here in the run defense game. Whaley goes for over 100 yards today. Wyoming 155 yards rushing. Have to think that's up there with the most yards, I think, the season that Texas has allowed. Again, I don't have those exact numbers on me, so don't quote me. But some other positives, the run game for Texas finally seeming to establish itself. C.J. Baxter is out, no problem, says Jonathan Brooks. Comes in, first Texas running back this season to go over 100 yards. He got 164 on 21 carries, set up one of the closing touchdowns for Texas where Quinn Ewers kept it and scored. Talking a little bit about some depth stands out for me on offense. Savion Red kind of making his debut of sorts today in 4th and short situations out of the Wildcat. Really love that play call for Steve Sarkisian. I think that is the perfect guy that you want in those 4th and short situations. Red, just a bulky guy who can get you that 1 or 2 yards. And then defensively, Derek Williams, the true freshman 5-star safety, getting a lot of snaps. We've seen Jalen Catalon still look a little bit limited. Played a little bit more towards the tail end of this game, and it was Derek Williams really taking a majority of those snaps alongside Jaron Thompson, Keaton Crawford. Eric, any other depth standouts for you?
Well, here's something that I think you got to commend Texas in terms of the offensive line, all right? We saw Cole Hudson didn't look like it wasn't a pretty injury, right? I mean, not that any injury is pretty, but this one looked pretty ugly as far as his knee getting twisted up there. DJ Campbell. DJ looked like he may have gotten beaten once, so I saw a communication issue, between he and Christian Jones on the sack that was allowed. Outside of that, the offensive line came in and played really well. So that was something that, in my mind, you have to be very pleased about. And I'll also piggyback off of what you said there, Tommy, in terms of the depth in the secondary, because I even noted that going back to the Alabama game. And we're not just seeing Jalen Catalon and Jaron Thompson. We're seeing a Derek Williams. We're seeing a Keaton Crawford. We're seeing a Michael Taft, not just with this game, but the Rice game. We're seeing other guys in terms of depth in the secondary, safety, and quarterback as well. Terrence Brooks, Manny Muhammad, that type of depth in the secondary, I think, is going to pay off, especially when you get into Big 12 play. So those things are definitely noted. And of course, we got to show love to the running backs as well. CJ being the starter, JB steps up, has a great game as well. So those things are certainly positives that you want to take. But again, you want to play 4 quarters of consistent football, and that will be the challenge as they enter Big 12 play.
All right, Eric, one more segment here. We're going to go offensive and defensive players of the game to close this one out. I'll go first. Give me Jonathan Brooks for offensive player of the game. As I mentioned, 21 carries, 164 yards. I mentioned this week that this was going to be the game where Texas establishes the run game, and they finally get a guy over 100 yards. Jonathan Brooks goes 64 over 100 today to get you there. And then defensively, Jahdae Barron. a phenomenal outing. Steve Sarkisian complimenting his tackling ability in the post-game presser. He led the team with tackles with 9 and a pass breakup additionally there as well. Just really good overall in coverage. Eric, your thoughts?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, if I couldn't take JB as my offensive MVP, I do want to show some love to Xavier Worthy because, again, a receiver can't throw the ball to himself. Certainly were some missed opportunities there. But when X got his hands on the ball, you saw a guy who just took that screen pass and went 41 yards. And I asked X about this postgame. I said, hey, well, was there any part of you that said, hey, when I get my hands on the ball, I'm not going to, kind of refuse to be stopped. And he said, yeah, when I got that screen pass, that was my mentality. Considering where the team was in the game, I just wanted to take it upon myself to go out there and say, hey, I'm going to go score. Nothing's going to stop me. We saw that attitude in his punt return game as well, and the same thing on that screen pass. And defensively, you nailed it with Jade. I can't, take anything away from him in terms of Tommy. His open field tackling ability is it's just a huge asset to this team because he plays such a crucial position in that star role where teams are going to try to get the ball in the hands of their receivers, especially their slot guy, pretty quickly, and it's going to be a one-on-one matchup. And the difference between a 5, 6, 7 yard gain, even more, or a play that can stop the line of scrimmage is Jade Barron's open field tackling ability. So have to also commend him for that as well.
So Texas wins it 31-10, and their final march to the Big 12 begins next week in Waco as they travel to take on the 1-2 Baylor Bears at McLean Stadium. Kickoff set for 6:30. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel for our instant reaction as Texas moves to 3-0 for the first time since 2012. For Eric Henry and the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yarrish. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.